Hi, everyone. This is Heather with the Old Schoolhouse, and I am so excited to share with you a special edition of Homeschool Live. This is the Homeschool Live Roundtable. We have several exciting authors and publishers who are here with us today. So please, if you know anyone, maybe a teen or a mom or a parent, anyone in the homeschooling community that's interested in publishing their own works, please share this with them, share it on your timeline, get this out, and they can ask questions during this interview. And also, you are welcome to leave any comments, and please like and subscribe. First, I would like to introduce to you Chuck Black. He is a former F-16 fighter pilot and a tactical combat communications engineer. You know him as the author of 20 novels, including the popular Kingdom series. And I'm so excited to have Chuck here with us today. Thank you for joining us, Chuck.
Thank you, Heather. It's a joy to be here. Appreciate that.
I'm also excited to introduce Alan Brokken. He is the father of a homeschool family of 3 children, and he is known for his series called Towers of Light. This series he wrote for his own children as a way to connect with his children when he returned home from his work as an IT consultant. His goal was to help him illustrate the deep truths of the Bible in an engaging and age-appropriate way. And this is just an incredible series, and I'm so excited to hear more about it. And we also have Paul and Gena Suarez, the publishers of the Old Schoolhouse magazine, familiar faces to us all. And I'm so excited for everyone to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
So I would love to just dive in. We really want to inspire those who are interested in writing. Maybe they're already writing in their homeschool, in their bedroom, on the side. And I would love to know what sparked your passion for writing. Any of you can answer.
Go ahead, Chuck. You start.
Sure. So it sounds a little bit like Alan's story as well. A little over 20 years ago, when my adult children now were young, anywhere from about 3 to 13 years old, I was having a family devotions, and I could just tell that they were not really engaged. They were kind of looking at the ceiling texture for pictures in the ceiling, and giving me the old elephant nods. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I've lost my kids, and I'm making the gospel boring. And so I knew that was a fault of my own, because obviously the gospel is not. And so I just went to bed that night just quite discouraged. And my heart prayer to God was, Lord, how do I inspire my kids to really understand the depths of the truth of the gospel of what Jesus did for us here on the planet and the cross. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I'm an engineer and a former pilot. I'd never written anything except for a few college composition papers. And I got up and I just started writing the story. It was just almost like a download. It was the craziest thing. And next time we got gathered together for family devotions, I read this story to them. I said, guys, we're gonna do something a little different tonight. And the transformation in my kids was just kind of remarkable. They were on the edge of their seats, their mouths were open, their eyes were big. And at first I was a little bit discouraged, because I thought, well, why should a fictional story do what I want the Gospels to do? But I'd written it in an allegorical form. And then I realized that that's really kind of how Jesus taught. He used small, short allegories, parables, to tell deep truths about the Bible. And so that's really was my inspiration came from my kids, just a deep passion for them to understand the reality of their faith, and I didn't want it to become dull of hearing. I wanted them to engage in it and see it with a new perspective.
Very cool. How about you, Alan?
Yeah, well, you kind of stole my thunder there, Chuck. It's almost the exact same story, except I had a slightly, different aha moment. I ran into a different challenge than you did. I was traveling for work. Like, God had put it on my heart to go do, I was a cybersecurity consultant, so I was out, securing people's networks and things like that. And so 4 days a week, I was in a hotel somewhere, just kind of by myself and calling home. And I would call my kids, and they'd say, "What did you do, Daddy?" And then I was like, and I didn't have anything to say. Like they did not want to hear about RSA 2048-bit encryption or any of the stuff that was top of mind with what I was dealing with my customers. And so after a couple weeks of this, I was feeling bad. Like, I really, there was good reason for me to do what I was doing from a profession perspective, but I needed to figure something out. So then one night, my youngest tells me about his little stuffed animal Sparkle Frog, and Sparkle Frog did a thing. I don't remember what it was exactly. I said, and so I said, well, and then what happened? And then he made up something. And then I said, and then what happened? And he made up something more, and it worked. So now I had 4 words. I could just say that over and over, and I had a conversation with my kids, and it was good. Until, like, I don't know, maybe it only took like 3 days, and then he figured out what I was doing. And then he says to me, no, Daddy, you tell me what happened. And then I was done because I was out of words. So anyway, I really did want this to work, right? I needed to find a way to connect with my kids. So I started, writing allegory. And to your point, Chuck, I was learning deep stuff that I wanted my kids to know. I was actually reading this book by A.W. Tozer that was just really hard to read. Like it was a hard read, but I wanted to get across ideas of the Holy Spirit, right? Because if you look in the Bible, all over the place, it says, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon somebody. And then something amazing happens. Like that happens over and over and again in the Bible. So I wanted to tell a fantastic story to my kids around those lines. And that's kind of, the rest of the story is pretty much Chuck's of, I started playing around with it. My kids got involved. In the end, we did a move across the country, and like my daughter helped write, like, say 5 or 6 chapters. We were driving in the car, and she was sitting there with a laptop typing up stuff while we're driving, and we're writing the story together. So that's kind of how we got to the first book in the series.
That's cool. So your kids were involved. You got your kids involved from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's excellent. And of course, with us, we don't write novels, and ours is different. We're self-publishing magazine, which we started 22 years ago. Yeah. And boy, it's been an up and down, interesting ride, but the Lord still has us here 22 years later. And the way it started for us is that we had this little eBay business. And so we were dabbling in eBay. We're giving our age away here. But when that was at its height, eBay auctions, we got excited about that because we had friends that were, they were selling little antiques or clothing or whatever. And I didn't have a camera, but I know how to write, kind of. I could edit and I could write copy, right? And so I thought that would be fun, but I don't have a camera, so I'm not gonna, because back then there were no iPhones or anything like that. And so I thought, well, what can we sell? And I knew that my passion was homeschooling. I had 4 children at the time, homeschooling them all day long, and I had a lot of books, and I had a lot of excess books, and I thought, well, I'll just start with some of these because I got a lot of used stuff here that I'll probably never utilize anyway. So short story is that started putting those on eBay and auctioning them off, and then going to thrift stores and finding like these little rare books and watching people fight over them. That was very fun. I'd pay $1 for a book, and they would just go sky high with people fighting. So that I got a lot of, that kind of filled my tank. I enjoyed that. Still didn't have a camera though, and everything was just written. And so Paul started going down to in Sacramento. We lived in California at the time. And there's a book depository out of the public school. Talk about your tax dollars at waste, because they would buy books and they wouldn't even use them. And so you'd walk into this warehouse and you'd crack them open. Yeah. You could hear it crack, the spine.
Wow. Brand new book, crisp.
Brand new books. And
very crisp.
But they were dumping them. They were depositing them, at this place that had, I would say there was 1 million books in there.
Oh yeah, they had mountains of books on this big warehouse floor, so that they didn't even have them shelved. A lot of them. Dangerous, these towers. Yes. So we started, and so Paul actually did a deal with the warehouse there and said, "Listen, how much will you charge me if I fill up my truckload?" He had this little Toyota truck, right? And but it had a long bed. So it could hold a lot of books. And the guy was just like, I want to get rid of all these. And so, I don't know, he quoted you like $100 a truckload,
which was funny because prior to that, we were filling up like grocery bags for like $25. Well, you can get 1,000 grocery bags in that.
Wow.
That truck. We ended up with tons of books. And we, even with the book depositories coming out of the public schools, they even had Christian stuff there. There were Christian schools that were so we found Bob Jones, Becca, all kinds of used stuff, and just like Saxon, tons of Saxon math books, all the sort of things that homeschool moms want. And we would just throw that up on eBay, and pretty soon Paul quit his job, but we were doing that full time, and that turned into a magazine. If you can, if you can believe
That's
that.
Awesome.
Now, when we say magazine, you should see our first magazine. It looked like a neighborhood flyer.
Yeah.
So we're being very broad with that label magazine.
But to us, it was a magazine.
Yes, yeah.
And it started the real magazine off after about, 3 issues of it not being color.
Yeah, we went from, this thing that we would go to Pip Printing, and if you remember Pip,
like Kinko's.
we'd print out our magazine there, our quote-unquote magazine. And then, what really changed everything was when I came home one day and I said, these magazines, quote unquote, they're getting very expensive to produce and mail out and all that. We have to find a way to finance this because it's coming out of my paycheck. And so my wife says, well, I'll just sell ads. And if you looked at our magazine back then, it's like, there's no way you're going to sell an ad in this thing, So, yeah. So by then we had a website that was very professional. It looked larger than life. It made us look like we were real. So Gena would get on the phone and she'd be there trying to sell ads, and they'd say, well, send us a physical copy so we can see what we're looking at here. She would say, well, yeah, we'll do that. But however, in the meantime, check us out. Here's our website. So they'd go there, check us out, and they'd come back and say, you know what? Well, I'll put me down for half a page or whatever. And so I quickly said, hey, look, we have to roll this money over quickly because at some point they will want a physical copy. And we need to look like a real magazine.
We can't look like we do.
Yeah. And so within 3 or 4 issues, we were already half color or full color.
No, full. Yeah, we were all the way through.
Yeah.
And actually, Bob Jones University Press, wonderful vendor.
Yeah.
They told us, they said, the marketing director at the time, she said, as soon as you guys go color, they were so encouraging. She goes, as soon as you guys go color, you let me know because Bob Jones will buy the back cover. And that's all it took for me and Paul. We were just like, okay, we're doing it. And we jumped. So anyway, that's our story. It's just a self-publishing little garage, basement, kitchen table, cottage industry.
Love it.
Blew up,
Had we known it was going to get as big and complicated as it currently is, I don't know that we'd be here right now. Honestly.
But God had, Lord had other plans.
Yeah.
God has definitely used it and brought us a wonderful staff. And oh my goodness, we've seen his hand all along the way. So 22 years later, we're still here. And that's the Old Schoolhouse Magazine's birth story. That's our home birth.
That's why God doesn't show us the future. We'd be too scared.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
Sure.
We've learned that many times over. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
It sounds like everyone here saw a need, right? So Chuck and Alan, you saw a need with your family, and that's what drew you to where you are. And Paul and Gena, you saw a need in the homeschool community, which brought you to where you are. And so I would love, Chuck, could you share with us how you feel like you found your unique writing voice? Maybe for people who really want to get into writing, how did you start on your journey?
A unique writing voice, boy, that's a tough question. I never really I wasn't actually looking for it. It kind of found me, I would say. It probably is an amalgam of all of my previous experiences, especially my reading experiences. Growing up, I loved reading medieval tales. I loved reading science fiction, and for some reason, H.G. Wells was I was a big fan of that, and I think it really influenced the style of my writing for sure. I love that, a little bit of that old, a little bit of the archaic, a little bit of the formal, but yet very exciting, very engaging, very adventure style writing. And so I think that just is what I naturally tended toward. The other thing that really affected my writing style is, I think, my military background. I had no idea that it would that would be such a platform for me to rest on when it came to being an author. And it really, almost all of my books, the central theme is spiritual warfare. And as I was a combat pilot, I was continually going back to the parallels between us being believers in the spiritual warfare and me being a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And I saw such parallels and such connections there that has driven my style and my tone, I think, through just about all of my work. So I would say that was kind of it. And obviously God gifts every one of his children with a special set of of abilities and talents. And I think that in there is a voice for everyone. Everybody's got their own unique voice, and it ultimately comes from the Holy Spirit, but he uses your experiences to develop it fully.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Sure.
Alan, how about you?
Well, so I feel like you can only write what you know. Now, what you may know is very fantastic because it's something you made up in your head. But at the end of the day, there's a level of that. And so part of the sort of, I'll say, Little House on the Prairie aspect of my stories, I've determined that I created a new genre called prairie punk. That is this thing that I do. But I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and I was just surrounded by the history of the prairie, so to speak. And so thinking about fantastic stuff and the armor of God being like a real thing, and that sort of drove part of it. But I think the other thing that's been really influential in finding my own voice is I've been, I'm a member of the Realm Makers Consortium. It's a group of Christian speculative authors that gets together at a conference once a year and kind of hangs out on Facebook together. That really just has helped shape and think. Like, I've had challenges in my writing that I needed something, like I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how to say it. And so they really helped out. I met my editor there. She's been just great at taking what was a good story and making it a great story. So, a lot of my voices just come from other people. And then there's just my kids, right? At the end of the day, I wrote this for my kids that were ages, 12 down to 5 kind of situation. And you have to tell a story a very specific way to keep them all engaged at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. And so my voice has sort of comic and whimsy to it that your young kid would enjoy, say 5 to 7, likes that kind of, there's some silly animals, there's some comedy that fits them. Then there's sort of action and building that kind of that 8 to 12-year-old kid might be more interested in. And then there's still some emotional depth and reality to the whole thing that your older kids, mystery, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so you'll find all of those threaded through. And to do that, I have to move from sort of the headspace of one child to the next to kind of make it work. But it seems to work. So I have lots of families that really enjoy that aspect, that all the kids can enjoy it at the same time.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat to have that immediate feedback, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to get that from your audience later once you start, once you publish something you're working on.
And your own kids are very honest.
Yes.
Yes.
Our children are honest.
Yes.
They're going to tell you like it is and how they see it, right? That's
yeah.
Good thing.
No, and they'll tell me when it's wrong. They're like, no, that's not right, Daddy. That's not how that works. Yeah. So
good. That's super.
And I love how you talked about the editor too, how they can just help you, and they don't change your work, but they can help you find your best writing style. So that was really good that you touched on that.
Oh yeah. My editor, it just wouldn't be what it is without all of her guidance. The editor makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, isn't that the editor's job, right? To make the author look great,
good,
or improve the author's delivery.
Yeah. That's what our editors do for us. They make us make sense.
Yeah.
And Gena, when I think of your voice, I think of Hey Mama. So that's kind of a tag that you've kind of put on yourself. Can you tell us how that developed?
Those Hey Mamas really developed and it started about 10 years ago, kind of developed just out of my own quiet time with the Lord and devotional reading. Just things that I was going through, things that people close to me were going through. I felt like, how would I address that person, even if I'm counseling just myself, or what if it was a daughter or just a close friend's daughter who came to us, and we meet a lot of people, we talk with a lot of people, we hear a lot of stories. Every sadness that you can imagine, we've heard it, we've seen it. Conventions it's interesting because we'll be behind a booth and the moms just open up, and they open up, and sometimes they really, it's an outpouring of they're looking for help. They confirmation that God really has put them on this journey, that their children are going to turn out okay. I mean, just it runs the gamut. And so those little tidbits that were just kind of placed in my, across my path, I started writing about them, and just short little blurbs. Hey, Mama, here's, what should you do? What does the Lord call you to do? What would God have you do? And there's joy in it all, no matter what we're going through, because the Christian is called to have, there's going to be trials. We know that God's word says there's going to be trials, tribulations, problems for the Christians. It's not just a cakewalk. And so I wanted to share that, hey, you're not alone, and that because when you're going through something and there's emotion in it, you sometimes feel all alone. You think, why me? How come I'm going through this? Nobody else is. They look around and they see all the other moms and kids and think everyone's doing better. And so I just wanted to kind of cut through that and say, no, you have no idea. Because just as you're looking at these other moms, wishing you were more like them, there's a whole bunch of them looking at you because you can cook better, or you can, or you're more patient, or whatever. You know? So it has helped. That's kind of how I found my voice in that regard, is just talking with other moms, I think.
Right. Sounds like a sense of community. And Chuck, I would love if you could tell us, I'm sure that you've found a sense of a community from your writing and the books that you produce. Is there a certain testimony, a touching testimony from somebody who has responded positively to your writing?
Man, it's been a journey over the last 20 years through this process, and I've just been overwhelmed and humbled by what moms and dads and young people have said about the works. I'm still kind of in awe every day at how the Lord has allowed me to be a part of the family reading time, and it's the testimonies that have come back have just been amazing. I still kind of think, that's obviously not me. That's God doing that work, because I'm not worthy. I found one because I knew you were going to ask that question, but so I found one, and I don't think I could convey it in my own words as well as this mother of four wrote. And in fact, when I read it, I wrote back to her and I said, "This is so well written. I think you should consider writing yourself." It's so good. So maybe I'll just read a little bit of it here. And she said, "These books are beautiful. I don't know a lot of other words that would detract from the simple fact that they are beautiful. The truths move from allegory to the realm of symbolic supposal of Lewis, in which an adult or a teen or a child can draw spiritual truths and pictures that apply in a wholly personal way, entirely different than any individual draws from them, yet each with equal clarity and purpose to create something that versatile and appropriate takes the gracious breath of God on the mind of the writer. I thank you for allowing him to use your pen. I hear the echo of the Holy Spirit whispering from these stories over and over, and I am elated to be able to place them in the minds and the souls of my children, knowing that his truth will bear fruit from these seeds." Wow. I'd say if there was anything that I could ever aspire to try to do, it would be that right there. And knowing that God is able to use these stories to disciple and minister and encourage young people across the country is just humbling. And I'm just, every day I wake up and thank God for that opportunity.
Yeah. And Chuck, you're a very humble man. I will tell you that we run across a lot of people who use your products and read your books. And every single time that we mention you, or that we saw you, or that we're going to see you, or whatever in conversation, people know exactly who you are. They know that series and they love it. And the homeschoolers I run around with, because my kids are still being homeschooled, our children are exactly at that age for the books. And they come over, they'll see them on our bookshelf, and they'll be like, "I have that series too," or things along those lines. They absolutely know the series, and it wouldn't have spread that far and wide if it wasn't a good series. It is accomplishing what God planned for it to accomplish. So that's super.
Well,
it's a great endorsement.
Thank you for that, Gena. And Paul and Gena, I just have to thank you guys so much, because you were such a big part of launching my writing career early on, way back when. And you saw the vision way back then, and I'm still so grateful to you today for giving me a leg up and getting a road into that world.
Yeah, praise God for that.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That is so incredible. Alan, I would love if you could share a testimony that you've heard.
Well, I don't know that I have anything at Chuck's level there. That was an amazing, like the artistry of that was just awesome. I think, the thing that surprised me the most in this, because I'm completely independent. My story is almost as humble beginnings as Paul and Gena's, from starting from scratch kind of thing. And one thing that's happened a lot is just I'm always surprised by the people that just help me out of nowhere. Like I just have people reach out and say, "Hey, we our family loves these books. We'd like to do X for you," whatever that may be. And lots of things have happened. But really the thing that I think really just touches my heart more than anything else is when the children get involved. I got just a random text on my website the other day from a mom asking, is book 6 out? So the last book in the series, is it out yet? And it's like, well, no, it'll be out in November. And then she responds back and says, well, my daughter loves your series so much. She wanted me to tell you that she's praying for you, that you will be able to finish your book and that it will be as good as the other ones. And I just don't know what to do with that. When like you've got children that are so, taken by your story that you're proclaiming God's truth in a way that touches their heart enough. They're praying for you. I don't know what to say about that. Right? Like that's worth, I don't know, everything. So I don't know. I'm out of words again.
That's very cool.
And that kind of reminds me, I had a question. Maybe it's kind of a silly question, I guess, but do you ever feel like you're doing a series, right? And I guess I'm guessing that a series involves books that the next book will pick up where the previous one left off, right? Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel like, okay, this is going so well, I don't know how I'm going to do better than I have thus far. I don't know if I can deliver. How do I bring a close? Do you ever think about, okay, this is going to be so many episodes or series long, right? And then somehow you're going to wrap it up in a very remarkable way where you leave your audience or your reader just feeling like, okay, this has been complete, and I feel all the better for it, right? Just encouraged or inspired, right? Do you ever feel like you get to a point where it's like, okay, how can I keep this thing up?
Or do you have it all figured out from the beginning? Do you have it already outlined from the very beginning?
So Chuck, if you don't mind, I'll take this first. My thing is this series was supposed to be 7 books. And then I got a whole bunch of people that told me it could only be 3 because people only buy 3. And so then I tried to make it 3, but it was 4. And then when then that wasn't quite satisfying. So 5, like 5's a nice arc. 5's an odd number. Maybe that'll work. And I had it planned. Like I literally had a outline of how that was going to work out. And then at the end of book 4, the characters told me no.
They walked out on you, huh?
Something like, I don't want to spoil it because it's actually quite shocking what happened as I was writing, because I didn't intend for it to end that way. I intended a very different ending, but it was the right ending. And so because of that, it's turned into 6, but 6 is a solid lock on 6 at this point. Although I'm going to probably get a bunch of people tell me, okay, you need to do another 3 after this as like a young adult series, and the kids are older. That's what I think people are going to tell me I have to do. But the net of it is, Paul, you just don't know. Like I think and maybe Chuck has similar experience. Like the characters tell me what's going to happen. Like there's a certain point where it just goes completely off plan.
That's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously when you're writing, everybody asks, are you plot driven or are you character driven? Well, I always start out plot driven because it's the story that I begin with. But about halfway through every book, the characters take over, and they will take you directions you didn't think you would go. It's kind of interesting. So then it becomes character driven, which I think is ultimately what it needs to be anyway, because we're relational people and we need to relate to people, not plots. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as like, boy, the pressure, Paul, that question. Once you start a series, there is such pressure that next one, can't be a flop. And oh my goodness, every single time. So I've broken a lot of rules. And my publisher is scratching their head oftentimes, wondering why did they pick me up? I think, but one of the cardinal rules is you don't have long series, because economically the last books never earn as much as the first book. So they want you to do 3 books and get out. So what I did is this last series that I'm in, the Star-Lord Legacy, which is a science fiction allegory of the Bible. I did the cardinal sin and published all 12 titles in my first book. And now they're expecting, there's no way out for me. Yeah. And people always ask me, what's your favorite book that you've written? And I said, well, I don't know. Each of them are dear to me for a reason, but I can tell you my least favorite one. And they're all like, oh, really? Which one? It's the one I'm writing. And it's because I feel like I feel like it's such a flop. It's just like, it's going to fall. I'm going to be a disaster and I'm done. And this is the end of it, you know? And then I set it down after I'm done with it, and I come back after a couple of weeks and pick it up, and it's like, well, maybe this will work. And then it usually ends up okay. God comes in and saves it. So, but yeah, that's it. There's especially that expectation, you know, of your readers, like you were saying, Alan. You know, those kids out there, they're anxiously awaiting the next one, and there's just this obligation that you feel that you do not want to let them down, and that's kind of that's every time you sit down to write, that's on your mind.
Absolutely. They want you to kick it up a notch, and sometimes I'm not sure where that notch is going to come from.
Yeah. But it works out. Somehow it works out in the end because they're highly successful series, so it's working.
Now, I know a lot of what you write comes from your creative mind, right? But is there ever, because you both have such unique genres that you're writing in, is there ever a time where you like have to do historical research or just research to make sure that you're not saying something so outlandish that you're not credible anymore, right?
Accuracy of events or whatever.
Yeah, great question. I like what you said, Alan. You know, you write what you know, and that is very true. I think if an author gets too far away from that, it does start becoming flimsy, you know, and your work can get pithy. And I've seen that in different stories, you know, across different genres. So I've tried to stick to what I know as best as I can, but absolutely there comes a time when you have got to do your research. You've got to be authentic in what you're trying to write and what you're trying to convey. Mm-hmm. Right now in the series I'm in, there's a lot of flying, a lot of piloting. So that helps me a lot, and a lot of military stuff. So I get to rest on that, but it's not enough to just rest there. You know, you definitely got to push hard and be authentic in what you're trying to convey. And I think the readers are smart, and they know, they can tell, even if you're trying to fake it. So
yeah,
there's no substitute for good background, good research.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that totally. And to your point, like I use what I know, but I also learn a lot. Like, so for example, in this current one, we mentioned kicking things up a notch. I added a hot air balloon to my 1800s, and I didn't know how hot air balloons work in the 1800s. So I did a bunch of research on it, trying to make sure that while I'm doing something fantastic with it, it's not so out of line with what could happen or how people in the 1800s would have approached a hot air balloon that's in there. I had to learn about, for other parts of the book, I learned about tanning. I learned a bunch of facts about bison and prairie dogs. I actually did if you remember Marlon Perkins' Mutual of Omaha, I have a whole thing I did around the animals, like that, of the animals of Zora, my fantastic world. So yeah, research is a huge part of what I do, because kids know when it's fake, like when you've just gone way too far afield. And I think the other thing for mine in particular is Jack London was a big inspiration for me, and he had these kind of gritty, wilderness stories of that period. And so I try to bring in, there's a whole thing in one of my books about just a kid being dehydrated a bit, right? And like, what do I do? What's that like if I don't have enough water? I try to bring those in along the way to keep the realism as real as I can without making it boring. Like, I don't go on to a dissertation about exactly how tanning works, even though we tan a hide somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And Jack London, his stories, they don't always end very how you would expect it, with roses and everything. And so it goes along with what Chuck Black was saying, sometimes you're going to break the rules, right? But before you break the rules, I would love if you could talk about getting into the rules and how you got into publishing, or maybe if you could just quickly share for those watching who are interested in writing the works that they're working on, how can they get started?
Who would you like to go first?
Go for it, Chuck.
Okay. So my entrance into being an author, I did break the rules, actually. My publisher said, you shouldn't tell too many people your story, Chuck, because that's just not normal. So I self-published to start with, and we started writing our own, getting our own copies, and my first 500 books showed up, and I thought, well, I'll give 6 to my children. I'll have 494 left for kindling for my fireplace. And but God had a different plan in mind, I guess. And so after a number of years, and one turned into 4 books, a publisher did get a hold of the book and the books, and they got really excited. It was Multnomah Books at the time. It's Waterbrook Multnomah, the Christian division of Random House. And so within just a couple of weeks, they got so excited because they were looking for something that would fit just this niche. For young people, it was an adventure story that still was, had biblical truth in it. And so it just kind of launched me in rapid motion into being a published author with a major publisher, a major Christian publisher. So I did a little self-publishing to start with, then went the publishing route for a number of years. And then my last series here, the Star-Lord series, the science fiction series, the publisher just didn't feel like it was a good fit for them. So now I'm back to self-publishing again. So I've seen all sides of it, and the self-publishing world has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. It's just remarkable what is available now versus then, both in not only editing and printing and publishing, but in marketing. And so that's what has made has brought a potential successful story for an independent author in reach is Amazon and Ingram Spark and global markets that are now instantly available. And so it really comes down to the quality of the content, and you just can't sacrifice on that. So I mean, that's a big question. There's so many different aspects to that. It really it starts with, I always ask people when they ask me that question, what's the goal for your book? Are you just wanting to write something for people you love and share a little bit of your life story, or are you looking to actually become an author, a published author? Because it's going to determine what you do early on and how you approach it.
That's really good advice. Alan?
Yeah, a lot of what Chuck says, I would just echo, like a lot of his points. I think the big thing though, if you personally or one of your kids wants to get into this, one of the things he didn't mention is really sort of writing conferences and writing events that come up. I mean, if you check the calendar at your local library, there are events that come up. I know I'm going to be talking at my local library here in a few weeks, and doing a writing event. These kind of things happen all the time. Explore some of those kind of events that come up, whether it's sort of a free thing at your library or paid conferences, and really learn some craft from those events. Pick up books on writing. I've got a whole stack that I'd be willing to recommend. But really do some research on that itself, like the craft of writing and how to do it. And then you can start to actually weigh kind of the publication options. Chuck mentioned self-publishing versus getting a publisher. Both tracks have like positives and negatives, and you could do a whole hour on that whole topic, probably like 5 hours on it. But just to say, I think more than anything else, if I could go back and rewind what I did, I would have gone to some writing classes, I would have started going to conferences way earlier. Because I just missed, there's a lot of stuff I had to undo or unlearn or relearn, that starting with conferences and learning from others would have helped me avoid, what Dave Ramsey calls stupid texts. I've done a lot of dumb things along the way for just lack of knowledge up front.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo that as well with you, Alan, on that. I would have, had I started over again, I definitely would have developed my craft earlier, so that I wouldn't have had to go back and now read it and think, oh, I should have done that better. But there's a lot of avenues for that to happen nowadays, especially with some online courses. I know Jerry Jenkins has a writing guild. I think there's a young writers workshop, and that I think Brett Harris is part of developing and has developed, which is phenomenal for young writers. And I think Paul and Gena, do you guys have something too that you've developed?
Well, we just encourage people to query the magazine, definitely. But we've actually been to at least one writers conference, and they had us go up on stage and talk a little bit about breaking into the, homeschool demographic. Is very different. When someone goes to a writers conference, the average person isn't even thinking about the homeschool market or just that demographic in general. So we were able to introduce that a little bit. This was in New Mexico, Glorieta.
Yeah, Glorieta.
And then we met with writers. So we actually, it's like a speed dating thing, but it's not dating. It's talking to writers. And so we're sitting at the tables, and they would come and sit down with us for like 2 minutes and get advice and ask questions. And then the bell would ring, and they'd go off to the next person who's there. So we did talk with a lot of them there, and just we were able to share with them a little bit about how to start writing. And it really, some of them they all had different different objectives. Some of them wanted to go into novels, and some wanted to write for a magazine like ours. So some of them wanted to write maybe curriculum, so something that's nonfiction. And so we did the best we could at the time. This was many years ago, just to share with them from our perspective. But we would certainly encourage anybody who wants to write to go find especially Christian writers conferences, and then get started by querying magazines, or just turning in small outlines for proposals or whatever for magazines. It's hard to break into, and sometimes self-publishing is gonna be the way to go at first, and then a publisher will find you. I remember we self-published for a while, and then I had Bethany House and others coming in at that point asking us if we wanted to write for them, and that was kind of cool. But yeah, Write for TOS is on the little ticker tape below. So writefortos.com. That's going to allow you to go and look at our themes, our upcoming themes for like the next year or two. We produce 2 years ahead. So we do that. And so the themes are all up there. You can look and see for anybody who's watching and wants to get their start with writing for a magazine. And it shows you how to query us. It actually gives you instructions. So it's an En-ROAD, and we have many people who had never written before, many, many, many authors who found us, and then they queried us. We liked what we saw. Our senior editor, Deborah Wooler, she is the one who will go through those and make the final decision. And sometimes too, we have these, becoming a writer is like a big deal for homeschool teens. They are really, they want to do that. So we'll do features, and I think you've written for us, Chuck, but I would be happy to have both of you gentlemen come back for a feature where we just do basic inspiring these teens to get started with writing. And Deborah would probably set something like that up. I know we're 2 years out, but maybe, so it'd be a little bit from now. But yeah, if you'd like to do that, we would love to have you.
And homeschooling is such a natural environment for that. It seems like what I've noticed about homeschooling, of course, we've always homeschooled our kids, but I wasn't homeschooled myself. So and of course, public education has changed so much, if you could even call it education, right? But one thing I've noticed with homeschooling is that students are more entrepreneurial. I can't even pronounce the word right, but they're more entrepreneurial minded. Yeah, thank you. And they're less timid than, say, for instance, in public school, where they're willing, if they think they have a gift for writing, even if maybe they're really rough around the edges, as most students are at first, they're not afraid to try it, And so you get these young kids who are just talking like they've already mastered the craft, which of course they haven't. But it's really encouraging to see that. I was not like that. That kind of thing was really, when I was growing up, I just wasn't encouraged to pursue that. And one of the things I noticed about you, Ellen, and also you, Chuck, is as you were speaking, clearly it came out that you're doing what you're doing because you just found a vehicle by which to share your passion with your audience. I mean, you're very passionate about what both of you are very passionate. It comes through, yes, about what you do. And I guess I can't imagine an author not being passionate about what they do.
You would hope, right?
But that's what I think when you guys speak. I think that's what young people see, and they say, "Yeah, I can do that."
Yeah, and Deborah's here saying that when she's looking at queries, often it is the passion that trumps the ideas. She's looking for that personality to come through because that's what's going to hit our readers and get them interested and hook them anyway into reading the piece. She's looking for that. So those are some things that perhaps we'll have a feature. We do it like every couple of years. We'll have a big feature on how to get started in writing, how to get started in publishing. What's the difference between self-publishing and publishing with a traditional publisher that you would query? So yeah, we'll be in touch about that because I'd love to have both of you appear in that feature.
That's cool. Hey, I do want to encourage parents to encourage your children to do this, because one of my pride and joys is I'm in this Star Wars comic book because I queried them and said, hey, I have a great idea. And so they put it in there in their letters to the editor. So, I'm holding on to that for the last 40 years. I'm sure if your kids were able to get into TOS, there would be a copy of that sitting in their office someday.
That's very cool. That's awesome.
So before we sign off, Chuck, can you direct those watching to where they can purchase your books? And maybe can you just quickly explain the age range that it's for and maybe just a brief synopsis of your books?
Absolutely. So my website is chuckblack.com, where you can get all of my work there. We not only produce the printed books, but we also produce audio dramas that are top quality, multi-voice, sound effects, music, the whole 9 yards. And so with professional voice actors, and so that's what probably, obviously you can get them on Amazon and everywhere else, but we would sure appreciate visits to our website as well. As far as the series go, there's 4 series that families might be interested in. The Kingdom series is an allegory of the entire Bible set in a medieval time period. Takes you from Genesis all the way through to Revelation, using castles, knights, and swords to kind of retell the stories of Scripture in a chronological order. And I would say ages 8 or 9 years old all the way up to adulthood. There's multiple layers of allegory, so it doesn't really matter how old you are. You're going to glean out where you're at, where your maturity is spiritually. Both boys and girls equally enjoy them, and like Alan's books, they're fantastic for family read-alouds. We have discussion questions in the back with answers that take you right back to God's Word, giving you lots of scripture references. So the Knights series is the Knights of Eritrea is a companion series to the Kingdom series, allegory of the Bible, but from a principle perspective, teaching how to overcome different strongholds that the enemy is going to throw at you. It happens in the same world as the Kingdom series. And it really takes you through overcoming rebellion, greed, doubt, escapism, apathy, and pride. Each book focuses on a different vice to overcome and virtues that help you overcome those things. The one series that I have that is not allegory is The Wars of the Realm, but it's a modern day spiritual warfare. It's sort of a cross between like a Jason Bourne, Matrix, Captain America, and like a Frank Peretti novel. It's lots of swords and guns and fighting, and it's a CIA FBI espionage thriller. A little bit more intense, I would say, since allegory allows me to teach about spiritual warfare with a bit of a buffer zone in there. This here, since it's not allegory, there's no buffer. It's angels and demons doing battle over the fate of mankind, and so it's a little bit more intense. I would say 12 years old on up. And there's 3 books in that series. There's 6 in the previous 2 each. And then the series I'm in right now is called The Star-Lord Legacy. I would say 10 years old on up. It's a science fiction allegory of the Bible set in the stars. It's a space odyssey. Christian science fiction, I think, is a tough genre to pull off. But once I landed on the fact that that I could use allegory to do that, it just kind of busted open the boundaries for me to just really be free with that, with my creativity, and not break too many rules, and still teach biblical truth. And so I'm having the most fun with this one, probably, I think, because it's kind of comes back to what I know best. And so and I've always felt like I grew up loving science fiction, but when I got into college, it got dark, it got perverted, it just got and even some of the wholesome science fiction is teaching messages that aren't biblical, new age stuff. And even though I still enjoy it and it's entertaining, it's still not, it's like, they just could have just done this, So this is my attempt to kind of redeem that genre just a little bit for us believers, and still teach biblical truth. So.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. Alan, can you share the same for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So you can find the Towers of Light series at towersoflight.net. And I'm saying /homeschool because this is a homeschool audience. What you'll find there is actually a 3-day sample that includes our curriculum and our audio. We actually put together some unique audio devices that you can order that go with it. So you've got sort of a travel around story with you to kind of deal with your busy lifestyle. But the big thing that we've got going on right now is that the series is, I've got basically curriculum to go with the first 3 books that is launching in April. And so there's a free shipping code there from the website, TOS Live, that you can pre-order and have that shipped to you sometime between now and April 16th. We're just waiting on the books to actually show up at my house. But the series itself is an allegory. It's 3 children who live on the prairie, and because it's middle grade, so say 3rd to 6th grade, their parents have to disappear under mysterious circumstances, because it wouldn't be middle grade if the parents don't disappear. And so now they're left with this fantastic adventure and danger of making breakfast, because it's the prairie and that's really hard, right? Like, hard to make breakfast on the prairie. The people they expect to show up don't, and now they're in this mystery of what's going on. They go to church and there's some new people there, and they're getting some fake news. So now the kids have to kind of go back to the good book to figure out who's honest, who's right, and there's a whole mystery in the first book. Each book then goes on with additional, kind of this story of the kids trying to save their parents is kind of the whole series itself. In the second book in the series, it's a story about basically listening to your conscience, listening to the still small voice. Book 3, the children become separated. They're lost and alone in a valley of darkness, and so they need to pray for the courage to fear no evil. 4 is the armor of God. They got to go find the armor of God. And then in book 5, Wellspring of Life, it's really focused on guard your heart, because it's the wellspring of life. And it's actually dedicated to our homeschool co-op. Our homeschool co-op is the Wellspring community. And then the last book that, God willing, will be out in November, Demolishing the Strongholds, kind of what it sounds like. They need to go just demolish the evil people at the end.
Very cool. Sounds exciting.
Well, I appreciate all that you provide for the homeschool community and others. Like Chuck, like you said, once the kids get older, it's so hard to find good quality material, and I have a hard time for my teens. So I will be on both of your websites later this afternoon. Definitely. I'm so excited to check out your works, both of you. And I just appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you shared with our followers and everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you will join us for our next Homeschool Live, which will be on March 22nd with CTC Math, and we will be here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and I hope you'll join us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.